All right, 20 minutes to the top of the hour. Welcome back to Daybreak. I'm Victoria Rubadiri, sitting in for Trevor Ombija this Friday morning. I'd like to introduce my guests really quickly as we get into this morning's discussion. To my far left, we have Soipan Tuya, the Narok County Woman Representative. Thank you so much for joining us. Next to her is Wanja Maina, a development specialist and chair of the Jubilee Party's People Living with Disabilities League. And last but not least, we have Anne Ireri, the chair of ILOG and FIDA executive director. Thank you, ladies, for coming in. It's a woman's affair, but we're not just talking about women's issues today. Let's take a look at the dailies. Daily Nation, front page. Now Sakaja faces arrest for forgery. So this story is escalating beyond questions around the validity of his degree. And of course, that front headline saying the embattled Nairobi senator was last evening in the crosshairs of an international criminal investigation over his degree certificate, with Ugandan officials demanding proof of his admission to Team University, evidence he paid tuition fees, and his transcripts. In Nairobi, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations confirmed that Mr. Sakaja and officials of the university were under investigation for transnational crime. So this is crossing into the territory of criminal charges, possibly for the senator of Nairobi. And let me bring you in on this, just in terms of, I know you've been following this whole saga, and you know, it goes beyond now degree qualifications into the credibility of someone's character as they're running for office. You know, what do you make of how this has developed in terms of Sakaja?
Thank you, Vicky. From where I sit, I think two things do stand out. One, there is the question of the requirements to be a gubernatorial candidate, which have to be complied with. And that is very important because we put in those requirements, especially for that level, for a particular reason, bearing in mind the job description and the duties of a governor. But beyond that, I think there's an entire question of, one, the credibility not only of this particular candidate, but what it speaks to us as a country and our education system. And so for us, we are very clear. We hope that we have objective investigation, that it is very clear what went wrong or what needs to be redeemed. And if he has, he does have a right to a fair hearing, let both sides be heard. But let's look at it from the perspective that we as Kenyans are also now going to start being marked by the international community in terms of our degree qualifications. And a number of us who've had a chance to at times even study outside the country, these are now some of the questions that will come up, that if you present your papers as a Kenyan, what implications are there? And so it is very important, not just for this particular candidate, and we hope he has a fair hearing, but beyond that, as a country, we want to be able to stand the test of credibility internationally, not just for ourselves, but even for the students who are currently in school.
No, absolutely. Wanja, you know, Anne raises a very important point there in terms of this has to go beyond Kenyan borders in terms of credibility of someone's education. You know, whether you get it from here within Kenya or outside. You know, when you look at Sakaja's case, and I know a lot of questions had been brought up when it came to this debate of whether elected officials should have a degree, a university degree, and whether that has a bearing on their ability to lead. You know, what do you make of what's been happening around his case?
You know, thanks, Vicky. I think 2 days ago I was asking my friends, how come most of the people who are having these degree scandals are men? Because I noticed if you look at the others, the male gender is overrepresented. So I was of the opinion that most of the women who are actually qualified with all the papers are doubting their ability to lead, while men who do not have even compliance documents are so confident. And it also speaks to a socialization and how, you know, a man who is half as qualified is deemed to, or has a lot of confidence in taking leadership. That said, I think the issue of Sakaja, I was speaking with some of my peers who are a bit older and were almost at the same time at university. So I was asking them, so what is this all about? Everybody was like, it's an open secret. It's an open secret. You see, when it comes to a qualification, like for example, a degree paper, a KCSE certificate, a KCPE certificate, there is a certificate. So like right now, however much I'll say I went to high school, the proof of that I went to high school is what my KCSE certificate. It's like what you're given to qualify that you went to this particular place and this is what you scored. I think Sakaja shot himself in the foot, really, because there has been clips that, you know, because his issue, the reason why it's all over the place really is because he's a public figure and his issue is an issue of public interest, and also because of the many utterances he has spoken. For example, there was a clip where he was saying that he has never studied outside of the country. There were places where he was saying, I went to actuarial science, or, you know, there's a lot of
conflicting statements.
Yes, from himself, actually. So it would explain why, obviously, that fueled by social media, where one clip is shared by very many people. But it's really an issue of integrity. And, you know, integrity starts at self. Why are you, you know, really, why are you lying? Why are you presenting yourself in a place where you're not? Where is your certificate, really? Because even when he made an official statement in his social media account, he didn't show the certificate. He just started saying, oh, I'm being witch hunted. It's the president who is against my political career. But where is your certificate? Because that is the only proof that this is what you scored. In fact, recently, when I was looking for my EACC document, I went to Huduma Center, and so they asked for my academic documents.
Okay.
I couldn't find my KCSE certificate. I don't know, I lost it. They told me you have to go to the police and get an abstract. So what is that telling us? It's telling us that it's a document you have to prove, or say I lost it. They asked me, where did you study? So maybe they'll go to their records and check. So where is your certificate? That is the question. You either have or you don't.
Well, and that remains to be determined by the court of law and, of course, the IEBC tribunal before we can say whether he is lying or not, and we leave that burden to them. But Soipan, you know, I really wonder, up until this point, had it been that someone's political affiliation or clout counted more than their education qualifications? Because now, of course, that is being used as a measure that gets you at least considered to be a candidate to run for office. But what weighed more up until this point that protected, and I'll use that very loosely, that term loosely, individuals like Sakaja or anyone else who right now has to produce papers to show that I did go to school?
I think, Victoria, there are a number of issues that come into play with regard to the issue of Sakaja. One of them, which you rightly ask, should we be requiring our, leaders in Kenya to have degrees, to have them qualified for office?
Yeah.
And it's a whole debate that I think Kenyans need to internalize and decide, because you realize that it's a blanket requirement. You're not even required to have a specific degree to show that you're qualified to lead. We should even be saying a leadership, qualification, or management for a governor, because you're managing resources, you're a CEO. It's just a blanket requirement for one to have a degree to be able to qualify for office. That's a question that needs to be looked into, because from where I sit, I think it should not be something that would really be required of a leader to have a degree, because I am a sitting member of parliament. I'm a politician. And, when you go to the ground and the kind of things that Kenyans require of us as leaders, I would say it is about, the leadership qualities of somebody, and should not be tied to credentials of a degree or a certificate or such a thing. But when it comes to the Sakaja case, I think the big concern for us should be our institutions. As far as I'm concerned, Sakaja was cleared by IEBC, and the issue just came up as a result of a lot of social media pressure, people, focusing the spotlight on him. But if IEBC had cleared Sakaja, why are we having all this drama? Is it that, what threshold is IEBC applying to clear candidates? And before we even go to IEBC, we have other institutions that are supposed to, do the clearance of candidates. Why are we here? And that's why one is tempted to think this is more political than anything else, because, we have institutions charged with looking at the credentials of candidates. Sakaja has come this far. He has been a member of Parliament, National Assembly, and quite, you know, a man who has come out to, you know, prove himself to be a leader of integrity, very able in terms of his legislative role. I served with him in the National Assembly. He has been in the Senate, and now up to the gubernatorial position. And all of a sudden, he is you know, there are attempts to disqualify him because of these credentials, which have, you know, have gone through a whole process of qualification, you know, approval by IEBC. And that's why, for me, I am looking for the political angle to the whole of this, because then it just doesn't make sense. So I think in overall, it is a debate that we need to engage in to know, you know, as we are electing leaders, as we are saying that somebody is qualified or not qualified, should we be tying it to these credentials, academic credentials? I am a master's holder, but I think it, you know, when I'm there serving the people of Narok in my legislative and representation role and oversight, I think that comes as the last thing that, you know, qualifies me to be able to do this. I agree with Wanja. It's a whole question of integrity. Yeah. You know, for a leader. I mean, if you're presenting yourself and you're saying, these are my credentials, it's either you have it or you don't have it, you know. But I'm putting a question to our institution. Somebody knows whether the degree is there or not up to this point. But even as for the leaders, I think it's a very small thing that, you know, I'm either a law degree holder from the University of Nairobi or I'm not. Right. And it is open for anyone to cross-check that and find out whether it's true or not. I mean, and whether this is politically motivated or not, of course, we have different camps saying that it is and others saying he just needs to produce the papers if they are there. I think the biggest question here, as you said, Wanja, is, you know, Chapter 6, we always kind of interact with it from the position of contravention. You know, someone violated and did not think through, you know, whether I'm someone of integrity. Are we allowing some of these technicalities to kind of get in the way of that bigger conversation, that this is what we should be holding our leaders to, especially coming to this election cycle? You know, in your view, Anne, what do you feel should be kind of driving these conversations when we're trying to kind of put our leaders, you know, through this vetting process?
I think, Victoria, for me, the benchmark is, as you stated, Chapter 6 of the Constitution. And integrity is integrity. It's black and white. If you have academic papers, they're there. If you have a questionable character in terms of holding public office, if you have been mentioned in certain scandals, for example, it's clear. And I think for us as a country, and I speak as a lawyer, is that we have got to really abide by the rule of law. And that's why we are having a mixed bag, Victoria, where the law is very clear, but then we have different interpretations of what really does stand the test of integrity. Yes, everyone is assumed innocent until you're proven guilty, but there are certain parameters we need to put in place. And if we look back at our history, we've had certain opportunities to really amplify that provision of Chapter 6, but we failed as a country. And so what we are having now are a lot of the trickle-down effects of us from the beginning, from the outset, failing to be very clear on what it is that amounts to Chapter 6. I'll give examples. We've had, even beyond corruption, instances where the state has failed in various ways. We've had children who have been hurt in schools, where we've had incidents, buildings collapsing. In most democracies at that point, someone would step aside. That's a failure in duty, and that would really resonate to say, yes, I was a person with a responsibility, this docket was under me, someone failed on the job, and for that, I'm willing to be held accountable. And investigations are carried out. If you found that you didn't have a direct role, you can get back to office. But sadly, in our context of Kenya, we rarely see people do that. And not just in public office. I think even in the private sector, in all sectors, we have got to internalize what that accountability as a leader means. If I'm running, for example, I'm tasked as being the CEO of FIDA. If something goes wrong, I should be ready to really bear the brunt of that failure and be held accountable. So until we mainstream that from our private spaces, from our private sector, non-governmental organizations, then public service as well, then we'll have really the full application. Because we often also tend to think Chapter 6 applies only to public officers, but it doesn't.
Right.
It is across the board.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Wanja, I'm seeing quite a few people tweeting here. Bob Owino saying, my worries is most of our politicians with questionable degrees didn't get them in Kenya, but abroad. I guess something is wrong somewhere. David Kadode saying, it's unfortunate that MP doesn't know it's a requirement for an aspirant, if a governor, to have a degree. Also, we need legislators who have a degree and above. You know, and this kind of, again, brings us to the whole question of what makes a leader. You know, what should be the markers or measure of this is a leader? And by Kenyan context, so far it has been, it's which political camp you're in. And I know this will kind of flow into the conversation we'll have about women in politics and just some of the hurdles that they have to overcome. You know, but from where you sit, Wanja, within a political party, what are some of those qualities that are looked at? Or is it the person with the biggest pockets and the closest affiliation to a party leader, for instance?
Okay, right. You know, you've asked really, Victoria, you've asked, you know, the degrees that have, you know, gotten abroad. It's not illegal to study outside of Kenya. There are also people who have degrees that are from Kenyan universities. So maybe we wouldn't say really that those who have fake degrees got them outside of the country, really. And I think this issue of fake papers, it's also individual. You know, I've noticed that once, for example, Senator Sakaja got into this problem, he has made it to be a collective UDA political issue. But the issue is affecting him as an individual because degree is an individual qualification. What makes a leader, you'd ask? It is a debate, and we can debate over and over, are leaders born, are leaders made? Right. But certainly I know that literacy and continuous learning is indeed a qualification for good and quality leadership. And that's why even when you look at government institutions, when you look at non-governmentals, there are a lot of trainings, there are a lot of capacity building exercises, there are a lot of trending and topical issues to be discussed. So one would, maybe the person who has tweeted is asking, is the maybe the degree or the high school education. But for me, I think education is a continuous process. But obviously, levels of literacy are important, and especially in public leadership. Say, for example, the governor, you're looking at managing billions of money. You're looking at managing people. You're looking at managing social and economic challenges that are facing people in a whole county. Therefore, for me, I wouldn't discount education as a qualification for leadership. It helps even in understanding, you know, even understanding what people are passing in parliament, even, you know, reading those documents. It's important. And I think then you've asked, let's say, for example, in the case of the senator and many others maybe who we have not been able to know about their cases, political parties is the first point of contact with people who are aspirants. And then, for example, if you noticed in the recent concluded primaries, after people are cleared by the parties, they had to be cleared by IEBC. Right. And that's why, for example, you are seeing some people being given. There was one presidential aspirant, Maure, who was told to make sure his things are in order by 2 p.m. We saw others who are disgruntled and unhappy. Too bad. So therefore, political parties are the first point of contact, but even after the political party has said that Victoria is the one who is going to get our ticket, you have to go now to the hands of IEBC, and that's where now such discussions are arising. But then again, when a person wants to be a member of parliament, an MCA, as at now, you don't need to have a degree. You remember there was this case that was ongoing when people were preparing to vie this 2022. But in the case of the governor and the deputy, it is explicit that one needs to have a degree, and as well as the presidential candidate, the governor and the deputy. So then, why are we changing the goalpost when it comes to one person, and yet this issue is actually written in? It is actually a compliance issue. Let's not start drawing gray areas. This is very clear that a person needs to have a degree, and it's understandably so because of the nature of the work of a governor. It requires a high level of literacy and understanding.
And I guess also considering the seat of Nairobi, it is the administrative, economic capital of the country, and I would say also, for the regional hub as well. But Soipan, when you look at Sakaja and just how he styled himself from when he first began his political career, crafting TNA, and the nation here says he was nominated to the National Assembly at the tender age of 28. I don't know if 28 is a tender age, but still quite young. Yeah. So he came onto the political scene as this young, vibrant, eloquent, intelligent, politician, and has carried that through up until this point, until we are questioning, okay, this is part of what makes a leader, according to the law. But, moving forward, what does that say to anyone else who's seeking positions, governor, senator, or any other elective post in this country, having seen what Sakaja is enduring now?
Yeah, I think one of somebody has tweeted or written, I am aware, and I know, I'm a lawmaker, that there are requirements for academic credentials for presidential, deputy president, and governors. And that is the law. I mean, we made it. It's made by Kenyans, and we are tied to it. But before I even say what these candidates should be making sure that their academic credentials are in order, I think my point is that as we have to live with the law. It's our law. We have made it, we own it as Kenyans. But there should be some kind of a qualitative, analysis or assessment of a candidate, rather than just saying that you must have a degree, There has to be levels of literacy. I totally agree to that. I mean, for you to comprehend the kind of law that will guide you as you execute your office and discharge your duties as a leader, even at the National Assembly, the Senate, the Parliament, there has to be a level of comprehension and literacy for you to be able to properly represent your people. But, this, and I think a diploma holder could have sufficient levels of literacy to be able to discharge duties even as a governor. But now we are saying degree, this degree thing is the main thing. And you have rightly put it. By all standards, if Sakaja, from even the face value and the way he has presented himself as a leader in this country, who would have doubts that Sakaja can ably, execute the duties of a governor for Nairobi County? But now, here we are, tied by this legislative requirement for him to have a degree. And it is not for me to decide that he, has it or not. I mean, but I think that for leaders, whatever office you're running for, then you must be prepared to confine yourself within the law. You must be counted to be a person of integrity. I think that's of paramount importance. Whether you have a degree or not, integrity should be non-negotiable for anybody who presents themselves for office in this country.
Okay. Allow me to just add something very briefly to what my colleagues have mentioned. I think for me, the other underlying issue in this debate, which is for another day, is a whole question about Nairobi County. I think this county is the one county that has experienced so much fiasco to the point one wonders whether it's a jinxed county. And I think, as you rightfully stated, we might need to go back as a country. And I remember even when the constitutional process was being done, there was a whole debate about, do we devolve the capital city? And perhaps we need to leave it at central government. And for us, if you look back at even the current office bearer, how she got there, There's been a lot of legal debates. I think the other thing that we'll need to resolve is the whole question of Nairobi County. Perhaps we look like in most countries, like even in the US and even in very many other big countries, that the capital city or the administrative capital is perhaps under the national government, and that eases out a lot of things, because it means today it might be Senator Sakaja, tomorrow it will be someone else. It just means it's the interests that the administrative capital of a country do attract. Then that means we need to revisit and ask, do we want it devolved, or do we then amend the law to have this then centered within the national government?
Yeah, interesting, because if you leave it to the political whims, it creates a lot of chaos. But yes, Wanda, you want to respond?
If I could just come in, Mheshimiwa Soipan has talked about when it comes to leadership, we should also be a bit qualitative. We should look at, for example, in the case of Senator Sakaja, my fear with this qualitative and trying to look at the issue broadly and the bigger picture is that it will affect women aspirants than it will affect the men because of the double standards. Remember, in this country, we had a deputy chief justice who was allegedly told she slapped someone. We didn't have a video clip, we didn't have anything, and she was forced out of her job. It is also in the same country where we have a sitting governor in 2013 to 2017 who slapped another member of parliament. We saw it in the TV, but he wasn't forced out of office. If we keep shifting the goalposts, if we keep saying that now in the case of this senator, he's good, has very good oratory skill, he has presented, the problem with the double standards or trying to look at the bigger picture, it is always edges the women out, because the women are generally not looked at. There is always, because of our socialization, because of the nature of the politics, there are always odds against the women aspirants. So if you don't have a master's degree or a degree, for example, it will be the easiest way to kick you out. After all, you've not qualified. So I think some of these things are not really, if we leave them to be up for debate, if we leave them to decide, tomorrow we'll say, to that gender rule, for instance, we can decide, after all, this male has shown leadership, let him also be the deputy governor of this person. And the next qualified woman will be kicked out because maybe they'll be told you have a degree, but you don't understand the political language. So for me, I fear for this leniency. I fear for this let's try and be a bit lenient, because it will affect women leadership, it will affect young people's leadership, because overall they are special interest groups and they are ordinarily not given the chance to lead. So I think we should just be clear. It should be as, black and white here.
Okay, and that is the perfect segue into our topic of the day, women aspirants and the political landscape as it stands. Let's take a short break here on Daybreak. I can see your tweets coming through. Of course, the hashtag is Daybreak on Twitter. And you can tag me at Vicky Rubadiri at Citizen TV Kenya as we keep the conversation going. Stay with us.